spiritual side, I tried to write down.
Right, if you're just keeping a journal, lots of times you just write it down when you have a vision or a inspiration from the Lord. But if you're writing for a purpose, like in this case, it's a class in which you want to produce something in 8 weeks, then it gets you to write more on a steady basis.
Would you, because I apologize, I missed the last part of the class. So what did you just say now, that the purpose of this class is what? To produce a particular thing?
If that, yes, that would be something, whether you publish it or not, we want something done by the end of 8 weeks.
Is it supposed to be continuous, like a book or a journal, or what do you mean something?
Well, I suppose that's why I said something. It's up to you. If it's a book, then that's you. You know, that's what you will go on and help you get it published. But if it's just a journal, at least you're going to show that this is a journal, and that's why you need to know who you're writing it to. If you, like Augustine wrote his book, Confessions, for the public, and it's been printed from 350 on. It's been printed for the public all these hundreds of years, and mostly priests and religious have read it. But nowadays, because of the internet, you don't have to go to the convent and the seminary to find these books. They're available to anyone. So we read it not too long ago. Actually, we read it during COVID. In fact, we were reading it before COVID and finished it, and part of it is filmed and on YouTube. But he wrote his for everybody to read. St. Teresa of Avila wrote hers just for her nuns. And yet, after she died, it was the nuns dispersed it to the lay people. So lots of lay people have also read the book of her life and her 3 books on contemplative prayer that she wrote. The other book that we're talking about is the Secret Diary of Elizabeth Lisieux. And this book she wrote it as a diary to God and giving praise. It was filled with prayers. But she did mention in there, I do hope my husband reads this. At one point, she was going to burn it because it was so private and personal. But her sister, which she shared the book with, encouraged her not to do that. And after she died, it was her husband that had the book published a couple of years afterwards. But it converted his life so much from an antagonistic atheist to a priest. And so what you decide to do with your writing, you need to know who you're writing it to. If you want your writing to influence other people, they have to read it. That means it needs to be in a book form and out in the public view. On our 8th class, we will talk more about publishers. I have one coming on my emails all the time saying, well, we write memoirs. Send them to us. And this is what they would be interested in. The publishing company that's redoing my book is Christian Faith Publishing, and they also publish spiritual memoirs, the journals of people. The Archbishop asked the priests to write what called them to the priesthood. Why did they become a priest? And this is so that they can use it in their speeches and their homilies to influence the young people in their parish. Whether they write it or not, he gave them a piece of paper in their notebook to write it out. But what they'll do with it, whether they'll write it on Facebook or whether they'll put it in a book in some form or just use it in their homilies. But if you wanted to use it to help people grow in their faith, it has to be put down and available to the public.
When you say that, I'm sort of curious. It's sort of like, you know, you have to think, you'd be thinking that what you're writing is so important, it should be published. That would mean like practically everybody in the world
Right.
would be writing, and then you'd be inundated with...
That's the problem with Catholics, is we don't want other people to think us holy.
Or you have too big an ego, kind of.
Right. But we are giving, as Augustine said, we are giving praise to God. That's what we're writing about. And that's how people should view our writing. I hope people, when they read my book, gave more praise to God. And the stories, actually only 2 prisoners have said how much my book influenced them. One changed his life completely from, he was in lockdown when he arrived at prison. He was that bad a character. And yet, he said my book changed his life, and he was moved over to a less serious prison, a less secure prison. So because of his behavior, after my book changed his life, he became the helper of the chaplain. He set up the prayer room before we came. He had it all set up. So you don't know how your book will influence people. Like Elizabeth Lassou, she was hoping that it would turn her husband toward God, but I don't know if she ever dreamed that he would become a priest. Augustine gives a tribute to God throughout his book. I'm writing this to praise God. His conversion came at the end in the garden. There was a final push over, but looking back at his life, he saw that there were bits and pieces of conversion throughout his life, and he wrote these down. And he recognized it was the prayers of his mother that influenced him, which he didn't realize before that. He also wrote it because he was such a bad character before he became a priest and bishop. And people knew his behavior. He had a mistress, a son out of wedlock, and they knew this. And what are you doing being a priest and a bishop? And he wanted to, before they threw it in his face, he wanted to throw it out in the world first and saying, this is my conversion story. This is how I was before, and this is how I am now. And also he wanted people to know who he was. He says, you know people by talking to them and what they're doing and that, but you don't really know what makes them tick. Why do they believe what they believe? And that's what we hope to bring out is, why do you believe? Why are you a Catholic? Why are you coming to church every day? What makes you tick? How did God bring this out in you, that you are now this strong in your faith that you want to go to daily mass? And the 3 people here have taken the healing ministry courses. God led you to that. Why? And how has it affected you? How has God affected a new life? And this is what we will be talking about. So you're reflecting on your faith journey. And all of these are a reflection of how God touched you. When? Was it as a child? Oh, I've always loved going to church. Or was it a teenager? No, as a teenager, I could care less about church and religion. Or was it when you got married? Well, I wanted a Catholic wedding because my family were Catholic. You know, reflect on how God played a part in your life, and then why did he all of a sudden come into your life, or how did he come into your life to influence you? And this is reflecting on your faith journey. And sharing your spiritual experiences and milestones in your life. It's a milestone. I remember being baptized in the Spirit. It just changed my life. That, yes, I went to church before. Yes, I prayed an awful lot. But I didn't pray the rosary because I didn't like it. But after I was baptized in the Spirit, I signed up for the 54-day Novena Rosary. So, that was a milestone in my life. It was a great change in my life. As my son said, Mom, do you remember when you said, if I become too religious, to let you know? And I says, yes. And he says, Mom, you're too religious. My boys were snowboard fanatics, and I thought, well, what's wrong with me being a religious fanatic? I overheard my son on the phone. He said, it's really scary to take the first step. But once you do, there's no turning back. And it's so thrilling, and you want everyone to experience it. You love it. You get all the magazines. That's all you want to read about. That's all you want to talk about to your friends. And you want every single one of them to try it. And I came down the stairs and I said to him, I overheard you on the phone, and what you were saying, that's how God is with me. And he says, oh, Mom, I was talking about snowboarding. And that's just one aspect of your life, and God is everything. But it's really frightening. I remember writing in my book, fear, because God was asking me to give my life to him. And the fear that overtook me was just like fear of heights, in which I was paralyzed. I couldn't move. And a friend held out her hand to me, and I couldn't take it. She was going to help me. She saw my fear. And I went and sat by myself, and I thought about my fear in my life. I wasn't born with fear. I lived in the tops of trees. And my mother was petrified of heights, but I didn't know that until I was in college. Before I learned that my mother was afraid of heights. And we were at Disneyland when I was in college, and we talked my mom into going on the gondola ride. And all the way up the stairs, she kept wanting to turn around and go back. And we said, no, you can't go back. You can't go back past this line. It's almost impossible to turn around and go against the crowd on the stairwell. And so we were on the gondola, and I would say, oh, there's the mermaid, and Mama would say yes, and I said, there's the pirate ship, and Mom would say, uh-huh. And finally I looked at her, and she was just staring straight ahead. She wasn't looking at anything. And she was just answering me, uh-huh, uh-huh, uh-huh. She was petrified, and I didn't know that she was that afraid of heights. And I was in college. She did not give me that fear. Even though I was up in the treetops, she did not give me that fear. So then we were in the Tetons, and we went up in a huge gondola. I think it held at least 30 people. It was a huge gondola, and Mom wasn't afraid of getting into that gondola. And we went up, and I was the first one out of it, and I ran to the top of the Tetons and looked over into Idaho, and oh, then I remembered Mom's fear. And I went back to her, and she was the last one to get out of the gondola. And just then, the wind blew, and the gondola moved, and there was a crack between the gondola and the rock wall, and that inch crack, and you could look down 1 mile straight down to the valley below. And I saw her fear cross her face for just a second. And then she just smiled and said, "I'll enjoy the view from here." Well, she was just looking into Wyoming. I wanted her to the top of the mountain to look also in the other side into Idaho. And so I held out my hand. And I said, "I'll help you across, Mom." And I helped her across. And she got to go to the top of the mountain too and look into Idaho. And it was so thrilling to have her there. And now, me being faced with joining Jesus, I had that same fear come over me. What would God want of me? And my friend had offered me her hand to help me across, help me with this fear, the same as I helped my mom with her fear, and helped her across the gondola, the step from the gondola to the rocky point. And you just, as I sat there praying, Mary spoke to me, and she said, "Remember the joy you had on the mountain." And I said, "Yes." And she said, "That's what it's like to be with Jesus." And already I was thinking, well, how will I provide? How can I live on the mountain and be provided for? And Mary said, "God will provide." So I really forgot that story. I haven't told it very often in my classes, but reading it over recently in my book, I remembered it. And so all of that, each one of those things were a milestone in my life, overcoming the fear, overcoming whatever it is that is preventing you from having God be so uppermost in your life. And then there's the key themes in your life and patterns in your faith journey. I don't know if I necessarily did that in my book. I just wrote the various experiences that happened. But sometimes you can, once they're written and you're going to collect them into a book, you might put them into a theme or a pattern. You might see them. Or maybe won't be a pattern of your life. God just entered it and wow, went from there. So today's assignment for next week is write a milestone in your faith journey. An aha moment in which God is an awesome God moment. And you just say, "Oh, wow." And you usually write with beginning the story. You can start with, "Let me tell you a story." And sometimes that's just a common phrase to just get your juices going, your pen on your paper, writing, "Let me write you a story. This happened," if you know the year or how old you were. This happened maybe 20 years ago. But I was walking in the mountains, and we came out into the mountain glen, and the beauty of God just struck me so much that I just stood there as God's sunshine, rays of light shone down upon me, and I felt his love envelop me. Maybe that's all you'll write for next week, just an aha moment of when God entered your life. Maybe it was after communion. Maybe it was holding your firstborn baby in your arms. And the love that flowed out of you. You just knew that wasn't love from you. You've never experienced such love before. You knew it was God showering his love into you for your child. An aha moment. Okay, so that's your assignment for next week. Write a milestone in your faith journey, an aha moment, in which our God is an awesome God moment. And we will see you next for the next class.